the flying instructor courses that I ran, I didn't run that many of them. I think I only trained about a dozen instructors total because they were quite stressful. Because the guys that I trained were very, very competent pilots in their own right, and of course had their own way of doing it. They weren't putty in my hands. It was this ongoing battle to sort of point them the way I wanted to go, but were not so rigidly that they couldn't use their own sort of talents as well. And of course from the outset I realised that the standard old 50-hour flying instructor course is not enough. It is not enough. And so we went about 75 to 80 hours of flying plus months of on-the-ground stuff to get all the stuff through so they could teach it properly on the ground and pass it on and just teach it properly in the air. So it was hard work, a lot of repetition, a lot of arguments, very stressful. But I remember every one of them very clearly. And they all graduated with flying colours. I mean, at the end of the day, I wasn't an instructor test officer. I wasn't allowed to test my own instructors in those early days. Someone outside had to. And the statistics were that a flying instructor coming up for his initial issue, he had a 30% chance of passing. They often had to go back 2-3 times before they would come up to the minimum acceptable standard. All of my guys, Joel and Enzo and all of them, passed with flying colours first time around, to the point where most of the FOIs said, golly, if I could, I would make you a grade 2 instructor immediately. You're way past the standard grade 3. And that made me feel really good, but that's what really has to be, you know. I wouldn't have accepted anything less. In parallel with that, I had applications from other young flying instructors from other flight schools who'd heard about us and wanted to do it. And the ones that came to me were game enough because they'd heard about me, but they were bright, you know, well-groomed, intelligent young men. But they didn't know how to fly. And I was seriously disappointed. I felt really sad for a couple of them whom I would have liked to have had on staff because of their personality. When it came right down to it, they did not know how to fly well enough to even teach, and they were grade 2 instructors. So there was a very interesting juxtaposition between what I was producing and what was already out there. And as recently as 2 days ago, when I did my grade 1 instructor renewal for the first time with a civilian ATO, because for the last 20 years I've had to do it with the CASA people, and this civilian ATO, who will remain nameless, but he's a very old and very well-known guy around the place, started telling me of the problems he had with the flying instructors, and I just accused him of being the problem. So why do you pass them? He said, well, we sort of have to pay as a minimum quota or whatever. I said, well, that's bullshit, you know. You just don't pass them if they're that bad. You know? So we flew around for a little while, and I taught him how to do a loop and a roll, which wasn't bad. Since he was 79, I'd never done one before. So I passed again. The Advanced Aircraft Control course is really just a euphemism. See, a lot of people are put off by the thought of doing aerobatics because they come from another flight school where their instructor said, oh no, that's all dangerous, you can't do that, the airplane will break, yada yada yada. So they come with inhibitions, but their credit is they do at least come. But I thought, what's a better way of at least getting them through the door to show them that they have no reason to fear anything? So we changed the name. For a private pilot, fully fledged, who wanted to learn aerobatics, it was the aerobatics course. For someone who wasn't sure but really wanted to learn how to fly better, we called it the aircraft or the Advanced Aircraft Control course. It's the same course. Right? Where they started, and this is in all cases called the aerobatic course or the Advanced Aircraft Control course, where we started the individual for the first few lessons depended very much on what his prior experience was. We'd go for a fly, have a look at what he could do, what he couldn't do. If he's really good at this, and that was part of the course, we wouldn't go back and waste his money doing it again. But if he was very weak on various places, so we'd analyse his position. So the beginning of each of these courses for them was tailor-made to suit them. But at the end of the day, the aim was to have them be able to do basic aerobatics so that they could handle all the situations. Because when you read the syllabus, you realise that we have at the end of the syllabus what we call mishandling. And basically that means, having taught them all these manoeuvres, we'll sit there and totally screw them up on them. They'll go into manoeuvre, we'll override them with controls and make the aeroplane depart from controlled flight every which way and get them recover. Usually after 10 to 15 minutes you run out of ideas because these guys are now so confident in the air that they sort of centralise the controls, fix the problem, go ho-hum, is that the best you can do to me? And that makes me feel really good when a pilot is just not fazed by the worst I can do to him. That's the final step. It's not aerobatics, it's advanced aircraft control. So the name is not bogus, it just fits in with the whole philosophy. The Sydney Aerobatic School always ran its own internal competitions. We ran them every couple of months, and we featured quite well in the others. I mean, our halcyon days back in the early 90s, we took our trophies in every grade of competition 1 year, first and seconds in every grade, and that was tremendous. You know, but it was a hard effort to get everyone to that standard, and a lot of money was spent. And that was when it was one of those peaks, and then it sort of fell back again. I mean, I started in the Australian Aerobatic Club back in 1976. I first competed, and I competed down at Point Cook when there was 40 or 50 competitors, and they had things ranging from Tiger Moths and Fujis and Cessna 150s, and it was a real fun thing to do. And there was only a couple of real hot shots at the top end. Chris Baru was one of them, and he was the Australian Aerobatic champion in a Pitts S2A. Problem is, the Pitts S2A now wouldn't even rate in the intermediate category compared with the hot ships that are out there. So little by little, the aerobatic movement, if you're into competition, has gone to more and more expensive airplanes. And it's a bit like Formula One race car driving these days. Unless you've got the big bucks, like Colin over here, to afford a really hot ship, and the bigger bucks to continually fly it like 4 or 5 times a week to be good enough to justify this machine, then you just don't rate. And to suggest that you go and you buy a Sukhoi or an extra 300 and put it online, it's not going to work either. It's like going out and buying a Ferrari and renting it down the local garage to anyone who wants to drive it. Not going to work. It's a specialist airplane for specialist people. There's a place for them, but there also is a place, and there needs to be a place for sport pilots. Because they have the potential to teach you to fly better, or teach you to fly properly. It's obviously, this is the hardware, if you like. You've still got to have the software, which is the flying instructor to go with it. But you must realise that if you go back to World War II and the years after that, all training aeroplanes were either ex-military or even the civilian ones in the 50s were all capable of doing aerobatics. Tiger Moths, Chipmunks, Victor Air Tours, which were made just over the road here. That was the norm. It was expected if you wanted to learn to fly properly, you had to know how to handle an airplane in 3 dimensions. And then in the late 50s, early 60s, the world's markets were swamped by Cessnas and Pipers, because some Madison Avenue dude over there realised, after much statistics, that people are more likely to buy the brand name of the aeroplane that they learn to fly on. And they decided that if Cessna wanted to sell lots of Cessnas, we'll teach them to fly on Cessnas. So they made these horrible little airplanes called Cessna 150s and Cherokee 140s, which were only derivatives of their touring airplanes. Pardon me. Derivatives of their touring airplanes. They couldn't be rolled upside down, they couldn't loop, they weren't strong enough, their handling was sloppy, but they were cheap, dirt cheap, because they were subsidised. And the poor old Victor company here at Bankstown went out of business as a result. They could not compete. And the older style airplanes, like the Tiger Moths and Chipmunks, never had a replacement of a similar ilk to compete with them. So before not too long, everyone was so-called learning to fly on a Cessna 150 or a Cherokee 140. And even though in those early days their flight instructors might have been capable of teaching them how to do some more advanced manoeuvres, the airplane wasn't capable of keeping up. 20 generations of flying instructor later, all they know is this style of airplane and all they know is this style of flying. They can't do aerobatics, they can't show you advanced flying training techniques, and they quake in their boots if you even ask them to, and the airplane is not capable. We've lost it completely. However, along the way, Mr. Robin in France, aided by Mr. Hines, his designer, came up with an airplane which is really in the ilk of those earlier airplanes. It is a modern-day Chipmunk. It is capable of fairly serious aerobatics. It's capable of taking off and landing and doing circuits and stalling and spinning and all those other things. You can do navigation exercises in it. You can learn instrument flying in it. You can night flying. You can do all of those things which those earlier airplanes could do. And it was the only one on the market at the time that you could do this. And as far as I know, it's still the only one that you can do this in. That's what makes it so good, because it is the hardware which enables them, the software, to come along. The problem now is we've got to get more software. We've got to teach more pilots to how to fly properly so that they will become flying instructors so that they can then impart this renewed knowledge back to students.